All right, so we're going to talk about the IELTS speaking test. We're going to talk about how the test is graded, and obviously I can give a lot of insight into this from being an examiner. We're going to talk about how you can increase your score. I think this is really important, and you want to focus on this. Don't focus only on the score you need. Focus on what you can do to increase your score. So if you need 7 and you're a 4 now, maybe you're panicking about how you can get your 7. Just focus on improving and increasing your score rather than thinking the actual score you need. And I want to talk a lot about what you can do to prepare, because a lot of students tell me, oh, I can study for other parts of the test on my own, especially the listening and the reading. You can do a lot on your own for the speaking test too. So I want to talk a lot about how you can prepare, and more specifically, where you want to put your effort. What should you be doing with your time? Now, a lot of you might be lower level English speakers. So I just want to tell you, don't worry if you don't understand everything, right? That doesn't matter. The purpose of this seminar is for you to learn something. If you learn something from this presentation, then I think that's the important thing. So don't worry if parts of it don't make sense. Also, because this is a video, because this is being recorded, you can watch it again later. So you can go back and review something so that it does make sense. Or maybe I say something interesting and you want to, maybe you forgot it at the end, but you remembered it was somewhere in the middle. You can go back and review, and I think that's a really useful thing. All right, so those are the 3 goals today about the grading, what you can do to increase your score, and how you can prepare. So let's look real quick at the grading criteria. Probably a lot of you know it already, but if you're new to IELTS, maybe not. There's 4 components of the speaking test. There's 4 aspects. So we've got the fluency and coherence, which is mostly about how quickly you speak, how effectively you can communicate. Vocabulary, obviously it's an English test. We can't have a language test without vocabulary. Note that each of these are 25%, so they're equally important. Grammar, 25%, pronunciation, 25%. So they're all worth the same. So sometimes I hear students say, oh, I got a low score. I think my grammar's bad. Yeah, it could be, but that's only a quarter of the score. Vietnamese speakers, which one do I think they have trouble with the most? It's this one. It's the pronunciation. And the reason why is because Vietnamese language is quite different to English. Languages come in families. So English, French, German, all the European languages, they're quite similar. So a German speaker would learn English probably faster than someone who's in Asia, someone who's in Vietnam, and the pronunciation would be closer. A lot of trouble with this one, and this one too, often. A lot of students, especially if your level's lower, you might have trouble with this one. You might have trouble to think of ideas in English, or maybe to communicate the ideas. Maybe you have the idea, you just don't know how to say it. So this one causes a lot of problems with lower level learners, people who are new to learning English. And then for some people with higher English ability, maybe you've done a lot of classes, you've spent a lot of time reading and listening in English. This one might start to be better, the fluency and coherence, but pronunciation. And as I said, it's because the distance between the 2 languages is quite great. If we turn it around, if I'm to learn Vietnamese, I'm going to struggle with the pronunciation as well. It's going to be difficult for me. Today, though, I think I can make the most impact on your learning right now by concentrating here. I want to talk a lot about fluency and coherence so that you can get speaking in English, right? So that's going to be my main focus today. And I'll cover these other ones briefly. The main focus, fluency and coherence. How can we get you speaking in English? So let's talk about errors or mistakes, because that's one of the things the examiner's thinking about for all 4 of the criteria about you making mistakes. And sometimes people ask me, how many mistakes can I make for 7? How many mistakes can I make for 6? It doesn't really work like that. When you make a mistake, we can really divide it into 3 aspects. The first one is the severity of the error, or how serious is it. If we look at this car over here on the right, it's quite serious. There's quite a bit of damage here. So we would say that this is a serious accident. And if you made a grammatical error that's serious, that has a high degree of severity, that means it's a major error. So obviously when the impact or the effect of errors is more serious, it's going to have a bigger impact on your score. Then the next one is the impact. What impact does it have, especially on communication? Can I understand you? If I can still understand you, the impact's low. But if I just have no idea, or I have to guess what you're saying, then that's a high impact. It's kind of like this car. Can we still drive the car? Probably not. So I would say it's a high impact because the car can't drive anymore. And then the frequency. How many times do you make the same mistake? If you only make it once, it's not so bad. Everybody makes mistakes when speaking. Even native speakers make mistakes. So if you only did it once, not so bad. If you're doing it frequently, then that's going to be a higher impact on your score. It's going to have a more serious consequence on your score. Just like this person, if they crash their car once, it's pretty bad, especially if it looks like this. But if it starts happening frequently, let's say every month, then it might be time for them to stop driving. So when we're talking about errors, we can think about how serious, what's the impact on communication, and how often are they occurring. Somebody can still get 8 for grammar even though they have mistakes, but not if they have high frequency mistakes. All right, so that's one thing that the examiner is looking for when you're speaking, when you're taking your test. They're looking for mistakes, and they're thinking about those 3 things when it comes to your score. But that's not the end of it. The other thing the examiner is doing is looking for talent. They're looking to see if you have talent. And if you have talent, that's a way of increasing your score. So don't be focused on just not making errors. Talent is also important. It can increase your score. It's very necessary. If you want to get to 7 and above, you must show talent. Just not making errors is not enough. If we were to look deep into the grading criteria, let's say vocabulary uses high-level language. You can't get a 7 for vocabulary without some high-level language. So what can you do to show some talent to your examiner? The first way is through fluency, by speaking at a good speed, by communicating effectively with the examiner. That's a way to show talent. For me, a level 8 is like somebody I can just communicate with effortlessly. 7, almost effortlessly. 6, we can talk about familiar things, no problem, but maybe if we want to go on to something a bit more advanced, maybe like the COVID pandemic, or the US election, a 6 is struggling. All right, you can show talent through intonation and stress. These are features of a native speaker that sometimes we emphasize words more, or sometimes we change our intonation a little bit, some rise and fall in the tone of our voice. So this is another way to show talent to the examiner, and really important for getting to 7 and beyond for pronunciation. All right, high-level vocabulary. Of course, it's a language test. Of course, if you can show high-level vocabulary, that will help your score. That will help that 25% component of your score, and just maybe give the examiner a favorable overall impression of your English level. See, I did make a mistake there saying English. I almost said English. So you can make mistakes. High-level vocabulary. Next one, complex sentences. Here I'm talking about grammar and getting a high score for grammar, increasing your score. Can be achieved a lot through complex sentences. These are sentences that have dependent clauses. Dependent clauses, so unfinished ideas in sentences. I'll give you an example. If I study hard, it's an unfinished idea, right? Because you're waiting for the outcome. Yeah, well, what happens? So if I study hard, I will get a higher score. So now we've got the complete sentence, the dependent clause, if I study hard, and then the independent or complete part of the sentence, I will get a higher grade. So knowing that talent is important as well means that you shouldn't only work on not making mistakes. You should work on showing talent because it increases your score. And if you're wanting to get to 7 and above, you must do these things, or you can't get to 7. You'll be stuck on 6, or maybe stuck on 6.5. I have a lot of people, a lot of students, often they tell me, I took the test 10 times. I get 6 or I get 6.5. I can never get 7. And often I give them a mock test and I might find out, for instance, that they just don't use any high-level vocabulary. There's nothing there to get me excited to get them up to that 7, even though they might not be making mistakes. That's not enough. All right. So let's look a bit more into in detail at each of these grading criteria. And as I said, I want to focus a lot on fluency and coherence, because I think at the beginning of your journey, if you're new to studying English or new to IELTS, you may struggle in this area. You might just have difficulty speaking. If you go into a class with other students, sometimes the teacher goes round the class. You take turns to speak, and maybe it comes to your turn and you just feel stuck and afraid. So I want to give you some help so that you won't feel stuck and afraid. I want to give you some ideas and some things that you can work on to help you to have ideas, to be able to communicate, to be fluent and coherent. Coherence is about understandability, people being able to understand what you're saying. That's important too, right? If your mouth's moving but no one understands the words coming out, that won't be good. Okay, so let's look at some things. The first thing the examiner's thinking about is your speed. And a lot of people immediately think faster is better. And it's true if you're at a low level, probably you need to work on speeding up. But sometimes I come across people and they're speaking too fast. Let's just have a comparison of normal, too slow, too fast, so you can hear, because sometimes people don't understand this. And just remember that you can go back and watch this again if you don't totally catch the point. So let's have a listen.
An average speaker speaks at about 150 words per minute. It's important that you don't speak too slowly or too fast. Let's hear too slow first. An average speaker speaks at about 150 words. Now let's hear too fast. An average speaker speaks at about 150 words per minute. It's important that you don't speak too slow or too fast.
All right, so if you found the last part of that difficult, that's because I was speaking too fast. And remember, it's about fluency and coherence. So sometimes if you're speaking too fast, it becomes the opposite of this, incoherent, and that's bad too. So you're not going to get a high score just because your mouth is moving quickly. Now, what happens to some high-level speakers when they take their test is that they feel nervous, and that nervousness often leads to speeding up. And why do they speed up? Because it's a kind of psychological thing going on. The examiner asks a question, the speaker feels nervous, and the way to get rid of the nerves is to answer that question as quickly as they can. So you want to speak at an appropriate speed. The length of your answers is important. The examiner is looking to see that you can give long answers. You're able to give extended answers, that you can speak at length, that you can take an idea and develop it, maybe explain it or give an example. So the length is important, not for every question. You don't need a long answer for every question, but you need to show the examiner you can speak at length. So even say for a 5, even you're targeting a score of 5 or 6, the examiner is still looking at the length of your answers. In terms of part 2, where you're asked to speak for 1 or 2 minutes, I think 1.5 minutes and up is good. You can get any of the scores by speaking 1.5 minutes and up, but a minute would be a little short. It'd be okay for 5. It'd be questionable for 6. It'd be doing a little bit of harm if you're trying to get to 6. And if you're trying to get to 7, too short. You need 1.5 minutes. Hesitations are another indicator for the fluency and coherence. So hesitation is when we need to pause. Maybe you have an idea, but you're just not quite sure how to communicate that idea. Maybe you need to think of a word. You just, there's this virus going on, but what's the name of it again? Oh, it's the COVID. So there's some hesitation, and we got 2 types. We've got voiced hesitation and we've got unvoiced. So voiced is like when people say or ah. This one's really bad. This one's better. Let me play you another recording where you hear the voiced hesitation. I'll be saying a lot. And then you'll hear the same recording, but without the voice, without the sound. Have a listen and see what you think.
It's important that you don't make too many hesitations.
Oh, sorry, let me just play that. I was going to increase the volume a little bit.
These hesitations can be voiced or unvoiced.
Hey.
Unvoiced hesitations are better. Let's listen to voiced hesitations first. It's important that you don't make too many hesitations when speaking. Now let's listen to unvoiced hesitations. It's important that you don't make too many hesitations when speaking. unvoiced hesitations are better because the listener does not have to filter these out.
All right, yeah, so it's better to have it's better to have a silent hesitation than make that R sound. Or another thing people do sometimes is they just repeat what they've just said, or they get stuck on a word. Like they'll say to. I went to the cinema, and I went with my friend. So that's also a negative. And then this last one, self-correction. So self-correction is when you make a mistake and then you know you made a mistake, so you repeat yourself and you fix it. So, for example, you say, last weekend, past tense, right? Last weekend, I go to the cinema. Oh, no. Last weekend, I went to the cinema. So a lot of people want to know, well, if I make a mistake, should I correct it? Yes, if you can do it quickly and smoothly. Last weekend, I went to the cinema. That's okay. But don't get to the end of the sentence and then start the whole sentence again. That's not as harmful for your score. All right, so these are the aspects of fluency and coherence, then: the speed, the length, the hesitation, and self-corrections. Okay, so then what can we do to increase our fluency? A lot of you probably right now are sitting there and thinking, yeah, okay, great, but what can I do? So here's the key part, right? What can you do to increase your fluency for your IELTS test? So one is get really familiar with the test. When you speak in the IELTS test, it's different than when you speak in the classroom, or if you were to use English for your job, or in school for studies. That's different. It's different than the test. You need to get familiar with the test, get familiar with the style of questions, right? And if you do that, you're going to find it easier, right? Sometimes I come across students and they've been preparing really hard for the test, and even though their English is not great, they're quite fluent because they're used to these questions. Furthermore, practice current questions. If you're about to take a test, there's some websites that show a lot of the current questions. Go on there and practice them. Why? Because if you go to the test and you've already and you get a question you've practiced, your answer will be much, much better. If it's the part 2, it's much easier to talk about something you already talked about than coming up with something new. And not only you've talked about it, you've thought about it. You've had time to think about it. So it's a great idea if you're going to take your test to try and find out what the current questions are and practice them. It will increase your fluency because it's easier to talk about things for the second time. You can work on some strategies to extend your answers, right? So I said the length is important. And sometimes people are telling me, oh, but I can't speak for more than one sentence. I just don't have any ideas. So I'm going to come on to this one very soon, these strategies to extend answers. I'm going to give you some strategies, and then you should practice the strategies on the current questions. And then if you get some of those questions in your test, you're going to do well. And practice different types of questions. I'll come on to different types of questions a bit later. But what I mean about types of questions, we get some certain questions that just keep coming up again and again in the test. For instance, liking questions. What do you like? What sort of food do you like? What hobbies do you like? What sort of weather do you like? It's a common type of question. What do you like? So you can practice for this type of question and it'll increase your fluency. We're going to look at these last two in a bit more detail, and they kind of fit together. And I hope you can understand it. It might be a little bit complicated, but as I said, you can watch the video again later if you don't fully catch it. Just try and understand something for now. All right, so let's take one of these common questions. What kind of food do you like? And we can see, oh, hold on, I've lost control of my PowerPoint. Sometimes it automatically goes to the next slide. So what kind of food do you like? And let's see some ways to answer this question. So I'm going to show you 2 strategies from my book. I wonder if I can pause this for just a second. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 strategies from my book. In my book, I've got 5 strategies, but I just want to highlight 2. Right, I want to go into depth on 2 of them so you can clearly understand them rather than sort of trying to rush through all 5. Okay, so let's have a look at our dividing strategy. All right, so it says up here, dividing it into 2 or 3 parts. Let's see what I mean by this. So remember, it was what sort of food do you like? So in this case, it means 3 kinds of food that I like. And I've selected Italian, Korean, and Mexican food. All right, so essentially what I'm going to do with this topic, what kind of food do you like, is I'm going to give 3 types of food that I like. This way I have a longer answer. If I just selected 1, Italian food, then that answer could be quite short. What sort of food do you like? Italian food. 2-word answer, not great, right? 2-word answer, not very good. So let's see how I can take these 3 types of foods and turn it into a longer answer. And you can see my example up here. Just go back a sec. So we've got our 3 types of food here, and you're going to see that I'm going to cover Italian, Korean, and Mexican. I'm going to put it, you can think of this as a paragraph. Think of this as a paragraph, just like when you're writing. If you've learnt how to write well, we often start with a topic sentence. Well, here's my topic sentence. There are 3 kinds of food that I'm really keen on. This means like, right? And then I'm going to have a sentence about each type of food. So now I'm going to have 4 sentences instead of 1. Or I could have just answered with 2 words. Oh, Italian food, right? But I've got a whole paragraph here. I've got 4 sentences. So now let's have our model answer. Just one sec. I've got a video here. A nice, doesn't this food look delicious? So let's see the answer.
Well, there are 3 kinds of food that I'm really keen on. The one I like best is Italian food, because it's full of tomatoes and they are very nutritious. I also like to eat Korean food, as it's very spicy and I enjoy spicy food. I'm also kinda partial to Mexican food, which I find spicy and full of flavor.
All right, so that gives you a bit of an idea of what I mean there, hopefully. So now let's look at a second strategy. So that first strategy was about coming up with 3 different types of food that I like. And then here's my second strategy, general to specific. In this case, with the same question, I'm going to use this second strategy of mine. So with this second strategy, I'm going to take 1 type of food, but in a very general form. So in this case, it's seafood, right? So I start off with a general food of seafood here. And then what I'm going to do is go from general to specific. So I start off with seafood. Sorry. Then I'll get on to Japanese seafood, and then a specific example of it here. Sashimi, which is a kind of freshly sliced fish. This is it here. It's a kind of a bit similar to sushi, but sushi, they often wrap it in seaweed or put it in with the rice, right? But this one's just the fish, it's basically raw fish. I could just say raw fish, but high-level language, right? Even though this word comes from Japanese, we use it in English. So just like sushi. Sushi is a Japanese word, not really, well, we can't say it's not an English word because we use it in English, which gives me an interesting question. I wonder if anybody knows of any Vietnamese words that are used in English. I've just suddenly thought of that idea. It would be interesting if you know some, put them in the comments section. Like, for example, with Chinese, there's some Chinese words we use in English, like feng shui. I'm just getting too technical. Anyway, you can see Japanese word sashimi gets used in English. Sushi gets used in English. I bet there's some Vietnamese words that get used in English. All right, let's move on. So I want to now show you a model answer using this structure, general to specific. Seafood, then Japanese seafood, and then an example. Examples are the most specific instance. So my paragraph is going to look like this, topic sentence, right? But let's actually look at the answer now. Another nice video. No, not another nice video yet. This should be a video. Here it is. Here's my control.
Well, I have to say that I'm a big fan of seafood. In particular, I really like to eat Japanese seafood because it's always so fresh. For instance, sashimi is delicious because the raw fish is so flavoursome.
All right, so that's the second strategy there, right? The first one was divided into three parts, the Italian, Mexican, and should have used Vietnamese. But Vietnamese food is delicious. I've been to Vietnam one time and I did enjoy the food a lot. Very, very excellent food. I tried the, Obama noodles, I think it was. Really liked those. They were good. Okay, so we got the three types of food was the first strategy. This one's the general to specific, the seafood, Japanese seafood. And now, as I said, there's some other strategies in my book, but what I want to move on now is another separate issue that can help you to become more fluent. It's worth you practicing. And what I want you to think about is the difference between preparing topics and preparing question types. I think most people do this one, and this is good. So they work a lot on topics like where you live and building up vocabulary about this, and it's quite effective. And then maybe this one, okay, friends, another topic, and let's learn a whole lot of vocabulary and let's practice talking about friends. This is a really good approach. But another way to approach the test is to think about different question types, right? So we can have liking questions related to these topics. What do you like about where you live? What kinds of people do you like to make friends with? It's quite effective learning about question types. I'm going to explain why. We've got another category, disliking questions. What don't you like about where you live? What kinds of people do you not like to make friends with? So this can be quite a powerful and effective way to prepare for your test. Let's look at some of the reasons why. And as I've said, most people are learning this way. Most classes focus on this way. This kind of reflects the test too. If you've taken the test, you know that the test is structured this way. But there's some reasons why I favour these question types, and I actually do both. In my books, I do both, and I think you should do both. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick this one. Let's see why. So let's have a look at...
Talk a bit about why we should prepare question types. First of all, there are fewer question types than topics. There's about 10 different question types that I'm going to show you, whereas there's about 200 topics that are currently in the test. And part of this problem is that you won't even know which topics you're going to get in your test. these question types that I'm going to show you make up over 80% of the questions you're going to get in your test. This means it's highly likely that most of these questions that I'm showing, or question types that I'm showing you, are going to occur in your real test.
All right, so the real point.
Another reason we want to prepare for these types
Sorry,
of
there's
questions
recording going
is
here.
because we can prepare language especially for this test.
Right.
And
Yeah.
another reason is that we can reduce our brain loading. If we're
Sorry, I wanted to say this myself, not have the recording. So let me talk about these points now. So the first one, there's fewer question types. So in the test, there could be like 100 topics easily, but we can narrow question types down to maybe, I think I've listed about 8 or 9 in my book. Maybe there's a couple more, but the point is there's not as many. We don't need to prepare for as many. There's hundreds of topics, but only a few question types like the liking, disliking, when you were a child, in the future, comparing questions, do you like this or this? So there's about 8 to 10 question types. So that means it's easier to prepare for these question types. The second one, the topics change, but not the question types. So IELTS is constantly including new topics, and that makes preparing extremely difficult. Maybe now they're asking about trees, but next year they'll be asking you about flowers or something else, or tea. So it's very difficult to know what all the topics are, and then they change. So imagine you spend a whole lot of time preparing for the current topics that are in the test, but then you don't get on to passing your test or taking your test till next year, and then the topics change. How frustrating. But these question types always remain the same. Okay? And the question types that I've got in my books make up over 80% of the questions. I'm only going to introduce to you, I think, 2 or 3 today, but there aren't too many more. And you can see from the 2 or 3 that I show you how this approach can be effective. We can prepare language much more effectively. If we're preparing for liking questions, we can start off by thinking about different ways of saying like. I'm really keen on, I'm fond of, I'm a big fan of. All right, so we can prepare language. Also, with this approach, we can reduce our brain loading, and I'm showing you a picture over here of a computer, right? Reduce your brain loading. Make it so that, part of the problem with fluency is that you have to think of what you're going to say and also how to say it. If you prepare these question types, you're going to know how to say things. You're going to know how to answer liking questions. What sort of birds do you like? You'll have some sort of structure to answer this question, even if you don't know the name of the bird. You'll still be able to answer, oh, I like big birds, ones with big wings and large beaks, large mouths. So it's a really effective way to prepare for the test, especially if you struggle with fluency. And we can focus on content words. We can have certain phrases that we can memorize and use to answer any questions of this type. If I'm answering what kind of food do I like, I'm really keen on. I can use that same structure to answer lots of questions. What sort of hobbies do you like? I'm really keen on swimming. What sort of people do you like? Oh, I'm really keen on friendly people. So we can focus on our content words by doing this, but we can't do that when we're looking at topics as well. All right, so let me show you what I mean. Things could get a little bit complicated here, and this is sort of, as I've said, you might need to re-watch the video again, more than one time maybe. So let's have a look now. So we're going to look at a liking question, And I'm also going to use the general to specific strategy. So I'm trying to put two things together now, right? I'm trying to put together the question type. We're going to look at liking questions and then disliking. And I'm trying to show you, how we can use our strategy at the same time, right? So what we can do, combining the two, question type with the strategy. So we're using here general to specific strategy, but you don't have to. You could also use the like the 2 or 3 kinds, like we had before, the 2 or 3 kinds of food. But I just want to show you this strategy with this question type. Right, so we've got the question, what sort of music do you like? Very similar to what sort of food do you like? Question's almost the same, it's just the topic has changed. Question type's the same. And using the general to specific structure, we can have phrases that we can standardize too. If we change this to food, I can use the same structure. What sort of food do you like? Well, in general, I would say I'm a big fan of seafood. What sort of music do you like? Well, in general, I would say I'm a big fan of classic rock and roll music, right? So you can think that this could be standardized. Here's our high-level language, and then we just have to drop in the language for the topic, right? So we can memorize this. We can practice using this phrase over and over again, and then just drop in what we need for the particular topic, all right? So it's general to specific. Here's the general. Here's more specific here. The in particular, sort of highlighting what particular type of rock and roll music I like. So now let's have a look at a model answer to this question. No, it didn't happen. Oh yeah, my controls here.
Well, in general, I would say, I'm a big fan of classic rock and roll music. In particular, I'm really keen on entertainers from the 60s and 70s. And I guess this is because they bring back fond memories of my youth.
All right, so it gives you an example, and I can memorize the structural words, and then if it's another topic like food, very similar answer, or hobbies, very similar answer. And here I'm just showing you, if we change the question to what sort of movies do you like, we just use the same structural language. Well, in general, I would say I'm a big fan of, and then underlined our topic language, and then more specific, in particular, I'm really keen on, and then we've got Star Trek movies. All right. So the point is that if you prepare for question types, and there's only about 8 or 10 for part 1, if you memorize some of this language, it's going to be easier to answer, right? And then we've also got our high-level language, big fan of, right? Really keen on. So it's going to help your score for vocabulary as well. It'll also help your score for grammar, because you can embed some high-level grammar and you won't have the mistakes, right? All of this, if you rehearse this, if you practice it, this all comes out error-free. The only problems might be where I've got the underlined parts, because you're having to add those in. Right, so if you struggle with fluency, this can really help you. This can help get you speaking not just in sentences, but in whole paragraphs, right? Because we've got the structural language here, and you only have to come up with the topic language. You could have comedy movies if you want. All right. So now let's see our answer to the one about the movies.
Well, in general, I would say I'm a big fan of sci-fi movies. In particular, I'm really keen on Star Wars movies. And I guess this is because they bring back fond memories of my youth.
Oh yeah, I changed Star Trek to Star Wars because I couldn't find any Star Wars videos. All right. Okay, so let's move on to another question type now. So now let's look at disliking questions, all right? And using this strategy still, general to specific with the disliking questions. And then this one, it's about music. What sort of music do you not like, right? So we can use our structural language again here, and then just drop in the keywords depending on the topic. So this could all be standardized, right? Generally speaking, I'd have to say that I'm not really fond of, and then today's modern music. And then remember, it's general to specific. Here's our more specific part. To be more specific, I really can't stand, so high level language, techno and rap music content here. And then the reason. All right. Let's have a listen to this one then.
Generally speaking, I'd have to say that I'm not really fond of today's modern music. To be more specific, I really can't stand techno and rap music. I think this is because it is loud, repetitive, and, in my opinion, doesn't highlight the musician's talents.
All right, so I hope you're sort of seeing what I mean here about how you can prepare for question types, how you can have some structural language and memorize it and apply it to different topics. You might want to watch that part of the video again later to fully understand it. So just quickly, what are some of the common question types? And here I'm talking about part 1 of the test, but I mean, we could still get liking questions in part 2 as well. Describe a movie you like, right? So it's not limited to part 1, and then we can recycle all that wonderful language. Well, I'm really keen on. So liking questions are common. Disliking, habits, about your habits. Do you get up early, or are you an early bird, or do you start late? Are you a night owl? So your habits. What do you do at weekends? Yes, no questions which require a yes, no answer. Do you like chicken? Yes, it's delicious and yummy. Or no, I don't. I'm a vegetarian. When you were a child, a lot of questions. This requires you to be using the past tense, right? In the future, future tense. So it's another advantage, right, of preparing for these question types, because we're also dealing with the tenses. So it's helpful for our grammar score. We practice these different tenses with these different question types. Comparing things. What's the difference between this and this? What's the difference between living in the countryside or living in a city? Okay, and then so that's part 1. That's all I've got to say about part 1. It's about using those different strategies, like the general to specific, and maybe 2 or 3 instances of something, and then the question types. So now let's have a look at part 2 in question types, because we've also got question types for part 2. And part 2, at any point in time, there'll be about 200 topics in the test. So you can't prepare for 200 topics. If your approach is to just prepare for topics, you've got a lot of work to do. So I can break it down. I can make it easier for you. Prepare for 5 things: people, places, things, activities, experiences. All the questions come under one of these. I don't think I've ever, might be going too far, but I can't remember a single topic that doesn't fit under one of these, right? And so it's really effective. Part 2 is always about describing too. I'll just show you. The part 2 task cards, if you've seen them, the first word is describe. You're always asked to describe something. So in this case, if you can learn to describe people, places, things, activities, and experiences, great, fantastic. You'll be able to do well in your test. You need adjectives to talk about these things, boost your vocabulary score. But I have another really important thing. Not only should you prepare for these 5 themes, you should realize that they're interrelated. Right? So, for instance, if you're asked to describe an activity you like, well, you've already prepared for liking. You're going to talk about you're a big fan of soccer or whatever it is. So you've got something you can recycle there. I'm a big fan of recycling because it makes your study effective. Makes your study effective. Part 2, if you try and learn how to describe 200 different topics, wow, you've got a lot of work ahead. I know students that have written model answers for 200 different topics. It's a horrible idea. How are you going to remember them? They're horrible anyway. They're not high quality because the focus has been on quantity, but with this approach, you can focus on quality, right? So if we have an activity you like, such as soccer, well, you can actually draw on your ability to describe some of these other things. If you're playing soccer, maybe you play soccer with somebody else. It's probably not on your own. So you can talk about your teammates, your coach. So you could, while describing soccer, you could be talking about the coach, the other players. Soccer gets played on a field. You could be describing where you play soccer. You need some things for soccer, like a ball, obviously, but goalposts, corner flag, that's some high-level language. And the experience, maybe it was fun, maybe it was exhilarating. So the point is that these topics are interrelated. We should learn how to describe these 5 things, and then we should appreciate that they're interrelated, that we can, in describing an activity, we can be describing some of these other things. Let's look at it in a bit more detail. So let's say, first of all, I'm going to start off and just talk about people questions. I want you to see that if you prepare for one person, a lot of that could be recycled for other people. If let's say there's 50 topics in the test at the moment about people, you don't need to prepare 50 different people. A lot of the time, the person could be the same. So this is the first thing I want you to realize. So describe someone who is talkative. Okay, the examiner only cares about this. This is just there to help you, but you can get ideas who the person is, how you know them, what this person likes to talk about, how you feel about this person. All right, and then let's see how we could answer it. Okay, so here's my plan on this question. Here's my plan. I'm going to talk about my friend John over here, and then I'm going to talk about how I know him. We grew up together. Then I'm going to talk about what he likes to talk about, his cockatoo here, this bird. And then I'm going to talk about his personality, extrovert and kind-hearted. So I can make this plan. All right.
Once we've done our brainstorm, we can write down plans.
And then here's a picture of John. So let's hear our model answer now about John.
I'd like to talk about my friend John, because he's a person who likes to talk a lot. You know, he's one of those extrovert chatty types. I first met John when I started working at the National Bank in New Zealand. We shared a common interest in playing field hockey. He's an early bird, and we would often practice together. In the early hours of the morning, I joined his hockey team, and so we often hung out at the weekend, before and after games. As a talkative person, John likes to talk about a wide range of topics. He has a cockatoo, and he's often telling me stories about his cockatoo. For instance, the time his cockatoo got angry and scared a child by ruffling his feathers up. It's always interesting to chat with John, because he has so many interesting stories to tell. He also likes to crack jokes. And whenever we go out for a meal or beer, he's sure to come up with a few witty comments.
All right, so you might notice there's some high-level language in here, like the witty comments and other things, and you should be able to recycle some of this, even if you're talking about other people. Witty is a sort of like intelligent humour. So if you prepare for one person, you should be able to recycle that language so that you're not trying to come up with new things all the time. It's too difficult.
Now, let's say I use my plan
Yeah.
with my good friend John to build a model answer. So I have.
Okay. All right. So then let's imagine we get some other questions. So remember the previous answer was a talkative person, describe a talkative person. If I get a topic, describe a childhood friend of yours, I can still talk about John. Here he is when he's younger, because I knew him when we were young. It's not me, by the way, just in case. I wasn't like this when I was younger, but I didn't look like that either. I didn't have long hair. So we could talk about the same person here. This could still be John, and I could be recycling all that stuff about him being witty and cracking funny jokes. Describe a teenager you know. Well, he's not a teenager now, but I know him when he was a teenager, and I could pretend in my mind that he's still a teenager and talk about him, right? So I can still be using that exact same answer. So imagine you come up with a model answer and you rehearse it and you practice, and it's wonderful because you've got all this high-level vocabulary, right? Well, then try and use that answer in your test, right? And you're going to get a high score. Don't let the examiner know it's memorized, though, or you won't.
So you.
Hold on. So the point here is that the same answer could be used for other questions, and even if it couldn't, even if I changed to another person, I can still use parts of it. I can still say they're witty and crack funny jokes, even if they're not, even if they're boring. And then the next point is that if we prepare this answer about John, and we've got all this wonderful language, and we can talk about John easily because we've practiced it, then when we get other topics, we can include John in these answers. Let's have a little bit of a look. So let's imagine we get a question about a place. Describe a place where it's easy for you to study. Who do you go with? Good friend John, right? So we have a paragraph about John and how he's good to study with, because when you take a break, it's funny, cracks funny jokes, it's witty. A thing. Describe a time that a piece of equipment was broken. Who broke it? My good friend John. Boy, was I angry with him that day, but on the whole, he's a good friend, and normally I enjoy hanging out with him because he's witty and cracks funny jokes. An activity. Describe a skill that took you a long time to learn. Who helped you learn it? My good friend John. Maybe it's playing hockey. It's playing hockey. I did play hockey with John. That's true. So maybe playing hockey took a long time, but my good friend John taught me, and even though it was difficult, we had a lot of fun because he's witty and he cracks a lot of funny jokes. An experience, a happy experience you had before playing hockey. Who you were with? My good friend John. So I hope you can sort of see this, because what I've seen people do is preparing a whole bunch of model answers, right? So maybe like people, they've got 5 different people, and I just tell them, look, you've got this great answer here. You can use that to talk about these other things. Or I get somebody and they say, oh, I don't know what to talk about. Happy experience. Well, if you've got some model answers about playing hockey and about John, then sort of put these together and make that into a happy experience. So same thing. We talked so far about the people questions and then recycling the people to the other types of questions, right? Imagine it's a place, and imagine you prepare a model answer about a library. So you've got a model answer about a library. Describe a quiet place you found. Library and studying with John. A building you like. A library, studying with John. Still, that's right. Describe a place where it was easy to study. The library, studying with John. So again, just with the people, we can, if we've got a model answer for a place, it can probably fit a whole lot of the other topics. These were all topics that were in the test together. I'm not making these up. These were real questions that were in the test, and I had students that would have a model answer for this, a model answer for this, and a model answer for this. This is, I don't want to say it's stupid, but it's not effective. It's not effective. If there's 50 questions about places, preparing for 50 places doesn't make sense because a lot of them can be the same. A mobile phone. We can talk about John with that. Something you lost, and then John lost it in the library. Describe the time when you've received your first cell phone. I can say that I got it from John and he gave it to me in the library. An activity, okay, I'm not going to do these last ones. I've done the people, places, and things, but you can do the same thing with activities. One answer could fit many activities, and your answer about the activity probably involves people because you normally do things together, and it probably involves places because we normally do activities in places, in rooms or some sort of outdoor location. Experiences, we do the same thing. So the whole point that I'm trying to make is that if we prepare a topic for a person, it can probably be used for other questions related to people and all these other ones too. And if you start preparing this way, it'll be easier. It'll be much easier. I think we're running a little bit over time, and that's okay. I think I'm going to spend about another 5 minutes. Keep going on the presentation. Yes, I hope that's okay because I've got some critical things to share. And I want to show you how the vocabulary plugs into this a bit more. You probably realise already, but I want to highlight it more because this is really important as well. So I know I've got to do these first. Okay, let me do the part 3 because some of you will be wondering about part 3. This part doesn't take long. And then I want to talk about the vocabulary, and then I think we're done. So part 3, question types. It's quite similar to part 1. If you know the test, part 1 is normally talking about you, questions about you. What do you like? What don't you like? And then part 3, we come back to our similar question types, but they're normally about other people. What sort of food do people in your country like? Right, so the emphasis shifts off you and onto other people. Why? It's harder. It's harder to talk about other people. It's easy for you to know what you like. What sort of food do people in your country like? It gets harder. So it's more difficult and challenging. But we can recycle again. We can recycle our ideas from part 1. But I do have another kind of sort of strategy, I suppose, to add on here. This burger, I got this new burger too. I find that this burger strategy works really well for part 3. One of the problems with part 3 is you need to give longer answers, about twice as long as part 1. So if we think part 1 should be about 3, maybe 4 sentences on average, part 3 should be twice as long, at least 6 sentences. Ideally, but it can get difficult and challenging for students. So I've got this structure. Now, I don't think you should use it for every single question, but this could be your kind of go-to strategy. This could be, or structure, a common structure that you use for many of the questions. Just like the burger here, we've got the buns. I'm going to call that the introduction and the conclusion, and then the meat. And here are going to be our 2 points. And I managed to find a lovely photo of a burger with 2 meat patties. It's a double cheeseburger, and it fits our paragraph really well because we're going to have our topic sentence. We're going to have our introduction, then the meat, the main idea. We're going to have the first idea, and then maybe elaborate a bit on our main idea is the meat, and we might just add a bit of cheese to it just to make our answer a bit longer. And then we're going to have a second main idea, another bit of meat, and then maybe some pickles this time just to make it a bit more delicious, a bit longer, a bit more interesting for the examiner. And then a conclusion, which is going to be normally just summarising. It's a bit like an essay structure: introduce, main ideas, body paragraphs, and then our conclusion, our summary. So let's have a look at how this works. That's really just summarising what I just said earlier. In case you look later, you might like to see it written a bit more in full. And let's have a model answer using this. Here's my slide. Okay, so we have our question: what are the advantages of shopping online? Here's our introduction. Clearly, there are a number of obvious merits. And then I'm going to have the two main ideas: convenience, saving money, and then the summary where I summarise convenience and saving money. And note, in terms of vocabulary, I paraphrase a little bit in this sentence. Even better if you can paraphrase your main ideas. So let's have a look at this model answer.
Clearly, there are a number of obvious merits. The one thing that really stands out is that it is convenient, because we can do it without leaving home. Besides this, a second positive point could be that we can save money, as it's usually cheaper. So I think the main benefits are the convenience and lower prices.
All right, and then again, we've got structural language we can memorize. If we change our topic to, I don't know, wearing masks during COVID disease, what are the advantages of wearing a mask? We can use all of this and then just change. Well, actually, we can use the whole sentence. Clearly, there are a number of obvious merits. The one thing that really stands out is, and then you're less likely to catch the virus, or the virus is less likely to spread. So we can recycle all of this, right? So a lot of people struggle on part 3. Their fluency goes down. They're trying to think, what do I even want to say? They don't even have an idea. You can say all of this without an idea. I don't need the idea till now. If I've memorized this while I'm saying this, I think of the idea. Clearly, there are a number of obvious merits. The one thing that really stands out is the virus will spread less. Okay. Another question type is disadvantages. They often come in pairs in the test. They ask you about the advantages and then onto the disadvantages. And same thing, we can structure it the same way. Introduction, main idea, summarize the two main ideas. It's a really useful structure because it results in a longer answer, and you can kind of pre-prepare the structural language and embed some higher words in there, paraphrasing disadvantages to drawbacks, right? Okay. Then another common type is solutions, right? I'll try to show you a list. So here's some of the common ones here. I sort of cover these on the slide, these 3, but we've also got some other ones as well that we can prepare for. And then some of the part 1, like the liking and disliking, they can still be used in part 3 as well. So we're prepared for those. All right. So what I want to do now, I kind of was going to talk a little bit about pronunciation, but actually really about the intonation and stress. So I'm going to miss that out. And what I want to do is just talk quickly about the, maybe I'll just cover these ideas. So I did have some ideas for you, because sometimes people are asking me, well, how can I improve my pronunciation? The main way is by speaking, and then maybe record yourself, listen to it, or listen to native speakers speaking and notice how that's different to you. You can have a speaking partner. That's useful, and listen to each other. You can practice on your own and record it and listen back, hear whether you're doing it correctly. Class. Most of you need to have classes when it comes to improving your pronunciation. You need a teacher to listen to you and identify your problems. And then you need to practice on your own. Practice them. Most students, for some reason, are just not willing to practice on their own. They don't think they can do it or something. Yes, you can. Speaking involves muscles in the mouth, and you need to practice regularly to work those muscles so that you can pronounce English correctly. So you can get your S's and SH right. I find S and SH, big issue for Vietnamese speakers, right? And the end sounds of words, because you don't have hard endings like English. So there are some things you can do. I just want to mock test, another idea. I want to get onto the vocabulary just a little bit because it fits with my idea about the question types, and particularly the part 2. So like I was saying with the question types for part 2, we've got the people, places, things, activities, and experiences. And the first word's always describe. So one of my bits of advice for the speaking is that you build up adjectives for part 2. This will make it easier to talk. It'll increase your fluency, but it'll also increase your score for vocabulary. So you need lots of adjectives because you're going to be describing things. You want some idiomatic expressions because that's specifically mentioned in the grading criteria. Level 7 uses advanced language such as idiomatic expressions, such as, it's only given as an example. You don't have to have idiomatic expressions, but I strongly recommend it. And then we want some, we do want some language for common topics. I know I said a lot about question types, but still we can predict some common topics, and we might want some language for that. Education, society, technology, crime. There's a few topics that come up a lot. You can upgrade some of your words like good, bad, nice, good, splendid, like, big fan of, really keen on, right? So upgrade some of the words that you commonly use. Let's have a look at people.
And some language.
Sorry, some parts of this I recorded first. But when we're talking about a person, we can think about their appearance, their personality, their relationship, and their lifestyle, their hobbies, their work, their interests. And you want to start building up adjectives for these. And I really like building up adjectives that are opposite. So we can sort of see this guy who's in some ways is an opposite to this lady. Well, the gender's opposite, the body type is opposite, the appearance kind of opposite, and personality, it's hard to see the personality, but look, he doesn't look very happy and she does. So we could come up with some adjectives to describe each one. This guy, instead of saying he's fat, we can say he's obese. Lofty means tall. Upgrading our language, right? This one's fat, this one's tall. Personality, grumpy, so the grumpy face. Pessimistic, sort of always has a negative view. Introvert is another way of saying shy, or likes to be on his own, doesn't like to be with others. And then what's my relationship to this guy? Maybe he's my great-grandfather. So everybody knows great-grandfather. Great-grandfather means your grandfather's father. So you can pre-prepare some high-level language like this to use in your test. Lifestyle, sedentary, that means not active. Maybe watching TV. Retired, not working. And then we can have some opposites for the lady. She's slim. That's a nicer way of saying thin. Petite. Petite means small, kind of a small body type. She's an optimist. She has a bright outlook on life. An extrovert, someone who likes being with people. My relationship, she's my sister-in-law. So sister, everybody knows sister. Sister-in-law means when you talk about your in-laws, that's your wife or husband's family. So I can say she's my sister-in-law. She's not really, just a random picture off the internet. But I could say it in the test. Lifestyle, professional. Look, she looks professional, a lawyer, an accountant, a banker. Active lifestyle, maybe she plays tennis at the weekend. So you can build up this language and then use it to talk about any person. If we're talking about a place, build up some adjectives. How would you describe this place? Here's a few ideas. And then what's the kind of opposite of this place? Something like this. Build out opposites, because that way you're covering most of the question types. Well lit, good lighting, high ceilings. These are called cubicles. But it's a really useful way to build vocabulary. People are often asking me how to build vocabulary. This is the way to do it. Grammar, I'm not going to cover grammar too much. I'll just say 2 points. Don't make mistakes. Find out what your mistakes are and work on reducing them. And start using complex sentences. I was talking about those at the start. Should be able to show you where we have one clause that can't stand on its own. If you would like further explanation, unfinished idea, that's the dependent clause, and then the other one is an independent clause. So you do that to be working on the grammar. Right, so I'm going to do a quick wrap up and then we'll do questions. So what's the best way to prepare for your test? Get familiar with the test and practice current questions. Read model answers. Okay? That can be useful for building your own answers. Look at some other people. Look at some by native speakers if possible. Try not to get ones from, oh, my friend's a 7 and so I'm learning her model answers. Well, why would you want to learn at a level 7? Because there's going to be a whole lot of errors. So get really high quality model answers. Don't be learning errors. You need some idiomatic expressions. Start learning them. You don't need many. Sometimes people want to learn 100. No, please don't try and learn 100. 20. Learn a few and then practice using them. Learn them well. And then adjectives for describing the people, places, and things. Vocabulary for common questions, especially the common question types. Liking, big fan of, really keen on. And then how can you practice? What can you be doing to practice? You can practice on your own. You really can. You can get a list of current questions and practice those. You can get a speaking partner. It's a really, really good idea. Not many people want to do it for some reason, but it's a really, really good idea. Don't worry about you'll learn mistakes from them or something. Classes are a really good idea for speaking. I think it's hard to really make progress without going to a class, or get yourself a tutor or something. Speaking is difficult to do on your own. It's not like the listening and reading. So yes, you can do it on your own, and thinking that you can't is a really bad idea. But I think you do need a teacher as well. So join a class and, get my speaking book. That'd be a good idea too. If you think, hey, wow, some of those ideas are great, then you might like to get the book. If you think, wow, I listened to you for an hour and it doesn't make sense, then maybe not. But you could think about it, and then you'll have model answers in there. And I go into more depth about the question types and how to prepare for them. Okay, so I think now then we can jump to Q&A. I'll just try and stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And go to like,
thank you, Mr. Mai, for the sharing of the structure and the strategy, and also some specific examples for the IELTS speaking test. I have received a lot of questions for you to explain. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So, can you suggest the books for pronunciation?
Books for pronunciation. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in it, and you might like to get some written by Vietnamese speakers so that they can really explain what the problems are for Vietnamese speakers and how to overcome them. So I think that might be really useful. There's just one book that springs out of my mind called Ship or Sheep, and that's quite an interesting one. It's quite old though, and what I like about that one is it deals with words that seem very similar, like ship or sheep, where just the vowel sounds different. We call those minimal pairs. So that one's really good. You need to realize that even though two words are similar, the sound's different. And I think for Vietnamese speakers, you have a lot of trouble with the short and long vowels and S and SH and C and CH, and then the endings of words. So yeah, I couldn't honestly recommend a specific book, but I would say you might need one written by a Vietnamese bilingual, and you need these kind of minimal pairs, the comparisons of words that are very similar. And most of all, you need to practice. I don't think you can really learn pronunciation just by reading a book, right? So you're definitely going to want to do some practice, and you probably need a teacher to listen to you as well and point out your errors, but record yourself too and have a listen. So yeah, I just have to say on that one, wow, I'm not the best person to ask, but I think some of the locally produced Vietnamese books are probably the best, because otherwise the focus is on problems for all speakers, and you need to focus on problems for Vietnamese speakers in particular. All right, good. What's the next question?
Okay, the next question is, what do you think about using mind map or storytelling to learn vocabulary?
Yeah, excellent idea. I think that's a really good idea. I think sometimes people are trying to learn passively, so they buy a vocabulary book, 10,000 new words, and they just start trying to learn that way. I prefer that sort of mind mapping idea where you maybe you take an idea and then you brainstorm off that. Okay, what words do I know to do with this topic? What words have I got to describe people? Do you know words like introvert, shy, extrovert? Think of the opposites. Someone who gets up early in the morning, early bird. What about late at night? Oh, a night owl. Yeah, a night owl. So really, really effective way, and it's active. So I think students tend to focus too much on trying to stuff new words into their brain, whereas you should do the opposite more of just trying to get out the words you've got already. And that'll help the fluency too, because one of the problems with the fluency is you have an idea, but you don't know how to communicate it, right? And so this kind of mind mapping is really, really useful. It'd also be really useful as a way to structure maybe a part 2 answer. I'm going to talk about this, and these aspects, and then I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about this. I often tell people for part 2, you want 3 or 4 main ideas that you can turn into paragraphs. So the mind map would be really helpful. Mind mapping was one, and the other one was like storytelling. Is that right?
Yes, storytelling.
Yeah, really wonderful for part 2. Stories work really, really well. They have beginning, middle, and end. It's a really good way to be fluent in part 2 and have enough ideas. So I think both of them, yeah, great ideas, excellent suggestions.
Okay, so the next question is, how many examiners will mark the speaking test?
One person.
One. Okay.
So you go into the room and there's an examiner. When you leave, normally they're writing your score straight down. As soon as you leave, they already know. They already know by the end of your test. And then you're probably wondering, well, why do they bother to record it? Right. The main purpose of the recording is if you go for a remark. If you go for a remark, a different examiner gets that recording and will listen to the recording. They don't know what your original score was. So that's the real purpose of the recording, is for the a remark. Okay. It's another reason why scores go up and down. So sometimes somebody gets really upset. They're trying to get to 7 and they got 6.5, and then they take another test. Oh no, my English got worse. I got 6. No, your English didn't get worse. Maybe it didn't do as well on the day, or maybe just a different examiner. Some examiners are stricter on certain things. Yeah. So one examiner, and the same, kind of the same with the writing. One examiner will mark your writing, except one examiner will mark the task 1 and another one will mark the task 2. Never the same examiner. It's the only, right? But it's still only one person's opinion. So when you get your writing score back, and let's say it's 6.5, if you need 7, it's probably worth going for a remark, because only one examiner decided you're a 6.5. Maybe on a remark you could get to 7. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And another question is how to keep calm when entering the exam room.
It's better. It's better to keep calm. I think everybody's going to be nervous, right? So you don't really need to tell the examiner you're nervous. Try and control your nerves, because the nerves aren't helpful, and they can lead to things like speaking too quickly, or your mind going blank. You just can't think because of the nerves get in the way of the brain. So try not to be nervous. One suggestion I can tell you to kind of help you relax. We know the first topic in the speaking test. The first topic is going to be your work or study, the home you're living in, the city you're living in now, or the place you grew up in. It's sort of 4, but the last 2 almost the same. You should prepare for these really, really well, so that you can get off to a good start and relax. Use that first topic to relax. And if that goes well, you'll be feeling a bit more calm when the next topics come. Yeah, so try to relax. Try to smile if you can. If you're nervous, try and show that you're not. Right? But, yeah, I don't have anything more about that. If you really got big issues, you have to go see a psychologist, right? And sometimes night before a test, I've had students and they're so nervous. I'm not really an expert on telling people how to be calm. But, you can also, you want to do some listening in English. There's some excellent TED videos on how to be calm, and they talk about breathing as one. And there was another one too about sort of something like you go to the bathroom and you shout or something, and that shouting gets rid of some of your adrenaline, or so. I don't know. There was something about that I remember. A couple of TED videos, really quite good about that.